And we are live with our 39th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back once again. 39th episode. We're pretty stoked about it. I decided to liven things up a little tonight, with my ugly sweater, my Darth Vader ugly sweater of all things. So if you're listening, you're going to have to go and actually find a picture of it. Maybe we'll make it the main image. Tonight, we're super excited that Jerry Gamblin is joining us once again. Jerry was our first ever guest on Absolute AppSec. And, now we've grown to, great proportions and, dozens of us that are here gathered together. So welcome back, Jerry. Thanks for coming on again.
Happy Tuesday, guys. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. I know Jerry's had some changes, in his, I can't remember if you had joined Ken already when we talked last time. I think you were still at your previous position.
Yep.
The last time we talked. So we can kind of talk about that a little bit before we jump into AWS reInvent and your experience out there. But besides that, I am starting to send out Absolute AppSec t-shirts. So Jerry, we'll grab your address. Those of you that are listening that have been on before, let us know or send me an email. I'm trying to follow up and get addresses. But if you want one sooner, hit us up on Slack or whatever else, and we can get that address and send it over to everybody. Let's see. Ken, anything else before we jump in?
No, I just think that Jerry was going to lead us into our substitute for our normal AppSec minute and talk a little bit about breach fatigue.
This conversation happened at lunch today. We were sitting around and just trying to remember all the breaches that have happened in the last, 2 months, and the list gets pretty long. Amazon had a big breach where they lost a bunch of email addresses and customer data for people. Quora just happened. HSBC. I think if you just go back and look over the last 2 months, there's probably been 8 breaches of more than 100 million accounts. At what point do people stop caring? And it doesn't even make the news. When's a major corporation going to be able to lose 100 million records and it doesn't even make a blip?
I mean, it depends on who we think it matters to, right? Like if you're talking about the businesses, obviously financial loss and reputation, maybe that's a bit of a, I think it was at AppSec Cali, what was his name? I can't remember. Famous car hacker. I did a lot of iOS exploitation. I can't remember. What's that?
Charlie Miller?
Charlie Miller, thank you. Charlie Miller gave a talk where he showed that basically as places were breached, their stocks did this and then went way up every single time. It actually almost seemed like you made money in the long run from a breach. So correlation not being, causation, right? But yeah. So I guess, are you talking about the individual? From what I believe, I think individuals only care about basically not credit, credit card information or things like that, but more so I'm trying how to phrase this delicately. If you stole images of them in
whose podcast is this? Just say it.
Well, if you got people's nudie pics, then yeah, they would probably care about that. But besides that, I don't think anybody else, I don't think a lot of people care about, because financially you just get reimbursed. Everybody probably at this point has free credit reporting because just about everybody in the US has been breached, right? Or has done business with someone who's breached. So I really don't know the answer to that question. I think unless it's like I said, nudie pics. And I think the other breach that mattered was what was the one where people cheat on each other online?
Ashley Madison.
There you go. Ashley Madison. That obviously, basically any dirty little secrets like that people care about, but credit card information, addresses, stuff like that, I don't think people give a shit.
Truthfully. Yeah, the iCloud hacker that's probably had one of the longest sentences I've seen, right? The guy who was popping all the celebrities' iCloud 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and that seemed to actually have somewhat of an effect, right? Like it was there. It was more than just like the disclosure, and then 2 days later, no one remembered about it. I mean, no one's even talking about Marriott, Starwood, that one, and that goes back to 2014. And then you start talking about some of the other bigger breaches, and people re-release things on, right? Whether it's like Yahoo.com and all those other ones that have happened. I mean, as a security professional, it's hard for me to care anymore, right? I know that, people that aren't in the industry are just like, who, it doesn't matter, right? And Ken's right as far as the nude pics go and the selfies and along those lines. That's where people actually care and would actually be concerned about it at some level. At least that's.
I'm going to share that article that you had mentioned because I thought that was fascinating. Yes. But yeah, we should definitely
go ahead and share it. And we'll mention it because that was one that I read recently. It was Vice.com. Millennials in China are using nudes to secure loans. So basically, the loan servicer is asking for nude pics of these millennials and that is the collateral for the loan. So if they don't pay things back, then they release those nudes to their friends and family, right? So they find them on social media. I wonder how much of that is, I didn't dig into a lot to the specifics, but how much of that is they have to be connected to them on social media as well. And it almost goes into that social scoring, the social media number that the Chinese government is putting into place now as well, right? It's very big brotherish, but I mean, I guess why not, right? Nude pic of you, and how much is that worth if it gets out?
Extortion as a service.
Extortion as a service. Sweet. So you want to bring that to the US? Is that what you're saying?
Could be the next startup idea. We'll see.
There you go. Next startup.
I mean, what do you think? Both on from a business standpoint as well as the customers of these businesses, Jerry?
I have problems with these payday loans that stores we have in the United States. They're charging the people who can afford it the least 1,500% interest. So I think it's a social. It's taking advantage of social norms, right? Like in the Asian culture, they're very private, so they're going to hold that over here, and then in the United States, I don't think that would work as well. So we just have people who charge, $80 on a $300 loan to somebody who can't afford it. I think it's cultural more than anything.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the predatory lending that goes on here for sure. And I know is what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau or whatever is supposed to help fight some of that, but it's still available, right? And, there's always been that element in the US, whether it's the loan sharks or whatever else you want to talk about. It's just more kind of business commercialized nowadays. But yeah, I would agree. People probably wouldn't use a nude selfie in the US as collateral because they're sending it to everybody, their friend group as it is, yeah. As much as you try to discourage that, but sorry.
I mean, what do you think of the insurance the cyber insurance? What do you guys think about that?
As a business or as a consumer?
Well, meaning, no. As a business purchasing the protection or whatever it is, basically if we do, because some places it's if you do an assessment, you get insurance. And then I don't know if you can just buy the insurance on its own, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Anecdotally, I don't know if I have both sides of this, but what's it going to be when you get breached? Is it going to be like if you're in a regular car wreck and your agent is looking for every way to not pay that? Oh, you're in a parking lot. We don't cover your car if you're in a parking lot because that's private, right? So say you're breached, they're going to be like, well, you didn't patch your jQuery instance, so that was negligence on your part. So writer 37BC says that we're only responsible for 10% of this claim. It's insurance is good as a big idea, but in practice, you'd have to see how that works and where the responsibility splits between the insurer and the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, I heard anecdotally of one company who offered insurance as an add-on with an assessment, and then they said, as long as your code doesn't change after this commit, then you're insured. Which I'm like, what? How does that work? So that's the only. I'm just not familiar with anybody having purchased the insurance.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, like, we've had some friends that do. I'm trying to think, that work for like legal firms and things like that, right? Some of those people, they're back in DC. Ken, in your area, I know some of those have been involved in cyber insurance claims, like on a smaller scale. But realistically, I'm kind of with Jerry. Is it seems like there's so many loopholes when it comes to patching software and standing things up on your network. I just don't. I don't ever see it paying out. Yeah, it's a good marketing effort, right? And something that you could market to people is, hey, we have cyber insurance, so if your data is ever leaked from us, then you'll be covered. But at a minimum, I think at most anybody's going to get out of that is going to be their credit monitoring, right? That's because that seems to be the only thing that a company does anymore is $5 and whatever.
Yeah, to be honest, like I think that liability insurance is really the cyber insurance for most corporations in America, based on what I've seen, right? Like being on both sides of it, that's always a question I asked when I was buying services, was like, oh, we need you to have $5 million of liability coverage. Wasn't cyber insurance coverage, but it basically acted in that capacity.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how they determine what you get reimbursed for. Is it because you purchased credit reporting for all of your customers? Is it for legal costs? Like, I don't know what you would even get reimbursed for, and like how that determination's made, right? Because like, yes, there's some immediate upfront costs, but then you got to think about like, which again, not a lot of data out there points to the fact that you're gonna.
Yeah. Okay. As a business, why even purchase it, right? That's just it.
It does depend, because I know that at least one customer who I always talk about with AWS security went out of business because of being breached and not being able to recover. And I don't know if like even financially getting reimbursed that would have even helped. I guess the one thing that's interesting is if you do buy it, then I'm assuming that you have to get a health checkup. Just like when I buy like life insurance, they wanted to take my blood pressure. They did. They took my blood work, had to get a physical and all of that. And I guess it's the only positive thing I can really think of is that, kind of force somebody to do a checkup like that. But is that a reason to do a checkup? No, you can do that without insurance. So
and they're just
anyways.
Outside of just medical stuff, those are so much snapshots, right? Because a month later, it's gonna, in security and in IT anyway, it's gonna be different, right? Like you could test clean one day and be okay, and then a month later run the same test and be in terrible.
Or days later.
Yeah.
The way code changes, the way infrastructure changes these days, could be a day later. Could be completely different.
No, and it definitely is. So, I mean, I think we're digging pretty deep into the cyber insurance, and I don't think it necessarily changes the whole breach fatigue discussion that we're having, right? Because I mean, it doesn't matter if Marriott's got cyber insurance, right? At this point.
But
was that their employees or customers?
Customers. Like how many hundred millions of customers? I'll pull it up. I'll find a link and we'll post it.
I thought it was like 500 million or something like that. Records.
Yeah. Yep.
But you know what? I know it sounds terrible, but like I'm a Marriott Rewards member, and
500 million guest reservations. So I don't know how many unique guests that translates to, but it's
now this is how you make that interesting. You post that and then allow someone to search it to see if their spouse was ever at a Marriott hotel when they shouldn't be. Going back to the Ashley Madison thing, see? Business idea.
There you go.
Did they ever figure out who had this? Like, has there been any attribution at all?
I don't know.
think. Yeah, I haven't heard that there is. Right, I haven't heard that anybody's claimed or. I mean, are there really still hacking groups that are doing that? Right? I mean, it's not the same as it was.
I mean, but you got to do something with the data, right? Like the actually Madison database was dropped online. The big government database with everybody's, top secret clearance forms. Nobody's heard anything about that, right? Like, is this the same thing? Does the government use Starwood hotels a lot for their VIPs? And there's a nation state who really wanted that information?
Yeah.
Who this is, and it's not, some kid in a hoodie.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's just it. We do see that would be an interesting research project in and of itself, right? Okay, we have all these breaches. How much data are we actually seeing leaked out publicly from those breaches? And can we determine from that whether or not, who the actors are, if it is a nation state versus, a hacking group in the Middle East or, Russia or whatever?
I mean, that's kind of the way I break it down. If it's publicly released, it was not an amateur. It was whatever hacking group or whatever. If you see 500 million records were stolen and you've not seen them on Pastebin, somebody had a reason to steal those and they've used them for their own good. And you're probably not going to see them float up online in 3 weeks, right? Like they're gone. Use is done.
Oh, well, I've always thought about we've got all these breach reports, and I've also thought competitive intelligence, right? Like, yeah. why hasn't, I mean, we're talking Marriott, maybe it was Hilton, right? That just decided they wanted reservation information for Marriott and, went and hired some vigilante group or whatever to actually go get that data for them. I don't think that we've necessarily talked about that very much as an industry, but I do think it goes on more than we realize, whether it's an internal group at a company or somebody else. The corporate espionage is alive and well, and that's a treasure trove of information. It is.
Yeah, and there are a lot of breaches that don't even get talked about. So let alone if they're corporate espionage, and how do they even prove that, right? Like sometimes, if they're hiring, like you said, some vigilante group or rogue group or whatever. I don't know, people with black hoodies in a room. It's very dark.
When was the last time there's been a major breach that wasn't self-reported? Like, just running back, Marriott was self-reported, Aura was self-reported. Like, I've not seen one of those, 2013 anonymous types of hacks where we have all your data, here it is on Pastebin, right? Like, I haven't seen one of those in the last year.
Yeah, I think part of it is that, like, when people get access though these days, like from what I've seen, again, anecdotally, it's the Bitcoin mining has become like the way people make money, right? And that's when someone's breached. That's usually like, I know it's different with like data being stolen, but even in that case, like there were hospitals just in the last few years that paid for ransomware. That had taken over their systems. I mean, there's definitely folks out there paying for those records for it not to be disclosed and to get those records back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that in my mind is probably why if you're not going to hear about it, it's probably because someone's paying someone to keep quiet, or a breach was more about mining Bitcoins and using the assets to mine Bitcoins. What do I know? I
mean, yeah, you work at the largest, conveyor of AWS credentials in the world.
It's them or Pastebin, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. So I was just scanning, speaking of, self-reporting versus, forced reporting. Krebs is always good on that, right? If anybody, Krebs on security, it looks like he had one in November, the United States Postal Service, that actually leaked account details, but it wasn't reported by the USPS. It was reported by an anonymous researcher.
Oh yeah, no, the researcher used him, press as a service, right? Like that was, see that all the time, right? Like he had found the vulnerability, emailed everybody he could, and they didn't respond to them, and I think Krebs even said in the story, within like 3 days, they had the vulnerability fixed after he reached out, right? Like that was a white hat researcher, just like, hey, this is a serious deal, not being able to get any traction because he didn't have a big enough following.
Yeah. Yep.
When you had mentioned, I went quiet there for a second when you had mentioned GitHub and AWS tokens, but there was a very specific reason. I wanted to verify that it was actually public knowledge. So I put the link to our documentation that says, hey, this is in beta, but we're doing token scanning for AWS keys, Azure, GitHub, Google Cloud, Slack, and Stripe.
Yeah, no, I saw that. That's why I mentioned that. That's a really handy service. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't actually I wasn't even sure if that was like, I couldn't remember if it was public or not, because I think it was around, I think it would have been released at Universe or discussed at Universe around that time, which would have been mid-October. So if it was disclosed. Cool.
Yeah, that's definitely useful. Anyway, all right. So that's breaches, right? I guess for now, until tomorrow when another one happens, or later today. You wanted to disclose something, is that right, Jerry? That's what you were saying, right? You had some breach they wanted to. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to actually, Jerry. Do you want to just give us a little bit of background on yourself, if people haven't, didn't catch up with that initial interview that we had, where you're working, what you're currently doing, and then we'll jump into reInvent.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Gamblin. I'm the principal security engineer at Kenna Security. We help bring intelligence to vulnerability data. You guys know this. Everybody that's listening to this podcast knows that every company has more vulnerabilities than they can fix. And the question you always get is, what do I work on first? And we help both AppSec teams and vulnerability management teams answer that question every day. And it's the reason I chose to come here.
I mean, it's a noble pursuit for sure, right? Just being able to give them a priority, give someone a priority list, right? We're always asked, like as consultants or security engineers, hey, what's the biggest risk that I can take care of? And most of the time it's so objective when I'm turning over a report as a consultant, because my scope is so narrow. I mean, when you're embedded on a team, or where you were previously, Jerry, it's easier because you understand the full scope of what's going on. But definitely as a consultant, I don't necessarily have that same purview into an organization. So it's very arbitrary, right? And
the number of vulnerabilities are just increasing because people can name their own CVEs now. And what was the last figure that we had, that like 80% of all CVEs are 9 and above, right? Like, so there's no pick this number and work on everything above that. You really have to be really dialed in on what's important to patch on your network and what can wait.
Yeah. Yep. Well, cool. And you've been at Kenna for how many months now?
9 months.
9 months. Sweet. Yep. Yeah, it's been fun to watch as you've been like online, the research and stuff that you always post, right? But definitely you can tell that there's been a shift in kind of your focus isn't as much on the corporate side. It's more on consulting and the other things that are going on. So.
What was funny was you said this was just like, I don't know, a month ago or so. You were like, okay, because you went quiet for a little bit. Clearly you were heads down working, and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna start messing with some stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, that was kind of like basically what you said on Twitter. And then next thing you know, there's like all these headlines about you and Google, and like that was pretty funny to watch, because it was literally like, for me, it felt like I watched you say, hey, I'm going to start messing with stuff on like one weekend, and by like Wednesday or whatever, I'm just kind of making this up, but that's what it felt like. Like by Wednesday, you're like on the headlines of different, tech outlets for having screwed up Google's home product or API for the home product. It's hilarious.
I needed to get like some stuff done at work right after DEF CON. So I was like, okay, I'll just try to keep off the research until October 1st. And October 1st came back around. I'm like, okay, let's go. And I look over and I have a Google Home Hub that just came out. And I'm like, oh, wonder what this thing does. I'm like, It was like 3 days later. It's like, okay, this is fun. Yeah, love talking to Google.
Yeah, it was like okay, cool, you're back at it. And then immediately after, it went nuts from the things you talked about. So, which was surprising because it was like, you would have assumed some of these things would have been, I would have assumed I wouldn't have seen that in a Google product. Sure, some like, like not name brand or like, there's cheaper versions of stuff. Like there's cheaper versions of Nest and all that. Cheaper versions, like knockoff stuff I would have assumed, but like, holy crap, like Google product. It was weird.
And the fact that their response was, oh, this needs to be behind on your home network, which isn't accessible to the internet. Like valid point, but that's not a layer of security, right? Like,
yeah, nobody ever messes up their wireless security settings. Or
nobody ever turns on, plug and play.
Oh, yeah, silly.
Or exposes a bunch of printers to the internet. Like we're running through that again. That's always fun. Those guys are back.
Yep. Yeah. So, so you looked at the Google Home, you released that, is there anything else that you're working on before we get to reInvent that, has been interesting?
Nothing that that's ready for public consumption yet. There'll be some stuff in January that hopefully I'll be able to roll out, but trying to be good, that's the hardest thing, right? Like responsible disclosure is great in theory until you have to sit on something for 45 days.
Yep.
And you're waiting and you're not hearing. And like, I've seen both sides of it, right? Like I know why teams need that much time and they can't pivot and your bug's not the most important bug, but I also know what it feels like to have something really cool that you found and you just have to sit on it and let the corporate, machine fix it. And then hopefully at the end you can drop your research.
Well, John Pullen had to sit on a Rails vuln for over like a year. I think it was more than a year. I think it was like 14 months or I don't know, something like that. It was a long time. And the same thing, it was just like, when is that going to be? And then finally got a CV and it was disclosed, and fixed, but it took forever, which is like kind of scary in an open source product to have something that was so bad. And then you like wonder, here's what I actually was just a couple days ago. I was like, I was thinking in my head, you've been in security too long when every time you do an update on your software, you don't think, oh, I wonder what new features it has. You're like, oh, I wonder if I'm backdoored, I wonder how shitty the security was and what's being fixed now.
So that was the Zoom update. Tenable dropped that research this week. Like they dropped a giant backdoor into Zoom and the patch from Zoom said bug fixes.
Yep.
Yeah. And then it's like remote exploit and the breakdown was super interesting. In fact, let me find the link and post to it. But yeah. Super interesting.
And then,
I mean, it's still the same. I should clarify. The exploitation, it's not like it was interesting, but it's not like this hasn't been seen over and over and over and over again. But that's a perfect example of like some client software or some software running that locally, not a website, sorry, that you update and it's because it had some super critical issue.
Yep.
It just gets interesting. Like, when do you decide that your vulnerability is dangerous enough that, if they're not fixing it in 14 months, that you think that it needs to be fixed, so you release it publicly, right? Like that's the razor's edge for security professionals, right? Because one tweet will get your Rails vulnerability prioritized and fixed, but it also breaks a bunch of trust. Like, where would that have to be?
Yeah, and that's always been the question with responsible disclosure, right? Is how long is long enough? You've got the people that wait 30, 45 days and just say, hey, you have this long to fix it, and then I'm just going to release. because you know, if you're not fixing it in that time, it means you're not classifying it high enough of a risk that you're actually going to do anything about it. So I'm going to force your hand.
It was the guy who found like what Mac OS exploit was that last year, where you could hit enter 3 times on a root prompt and it would just let you through. Like, he did it the right way. Like, if I would have found that, like, that would have been hard to keep in your back pocket for 45 days as Apple tried to figure out what the problem with that was.
Well, I'm pretty sure he used it over and over for that 45 days, though. Hey guys, check this out. Boop, boop, boop. Ha ha ha. Walks away, you know. But yeah, it's hard. It is definitely kind of a hard line to walk when you found that stuff. Not to go back too far. Well, I don't know. Dave Corsi brought up the Atrium breach. I'm not sure even what that one is, right? It's only like I say, it's only 2.65 million records. Somebody trying to pull stuff off AccuDoc, but I haven't heard about it. So
yeah, I mean, I put a link to that because the other one had an ad blocker thing. By the way, don't get me started on sites that say like, "Oh, you're using ad blocker, so you like need to have a subscription now." Like, horse shit. But anyways, yeah, post another link. But like, the weird thing is, we had that huge breach, and I think like, I'm not sure if we ever figured out exactly like, sorry, the huge what was it, like Blue Cross Blue Shield or something like that, Anthem, and like tons of social security numbers and everything stolen, and medical info, and like, I wonder if that's actually ever, I haven't heard anything about that actually being used, that data being used. But yeah, like I kind of, there were set many theories. One of the theories was that like, going back to nation state, this could be used to basically exploit people, right? You know,
well, and that ties in with the whole
spy espionage type stuff, right? Oh, what's that?
Layering all the breaches, like you have the OPM data as your base, then you get health data, and then you get financial. Yeah. Like if the same company the same country had all 3 of those breaches, you basically have corporate scoring or credit scoring for every individual in the United States, right? From their health to.
Well, and right. Then you add Marriott data to that. Like, you've got location data on people, right? Like historical location data on where people are traveling and what they're doing, right? It becomes, you're building a huge picture. And so it really wouldn't surprise me if it is a nation state that's doing it and just gathering that info and starting to tie it all together somewhere.
I mean, admittedly, I've been watching The Americans for like the last few weeks now, so I'm a little bit more paranoid than normal. But it does feel like it'd be a great way for espionage, from an espionage standpoint, to like cultivate assets, right? So,
yeah. So, you know, Dave, to answer your question, no, I guess none of us have really like dealt with it. So we'll talk more on the Slack channel about that. So Jerry, you've disclosed that stuff. So let's talk about reInvent. I memean, obviously there was a whole bunch of kind of security news that came out of reInvent. There always is. It's one conference that I feel like when I go to, I can't see enough, right? Just because there's so much that's going on. But I didn't make it this year. Me and Ken, I don't think either of us made it. But so first of all, like the big one was that they were going to have just a security conference, right?
Yeah, once again, like they make security the redheaded stepchildren of the platform, and move everybody to Boston at the end of June, which is either tone deaf timing, or they have a big database that says that people will go there and then fly out to Vegas for a week within a month, right? Like that was the thing that got me when I started looking at the timing. It's like, yeah, that would be cool, but not, 3 or 4 weeks before I have to go and go out to Black Hat for a week.
Yeah, I don't know how that's actually going to run. Like, how many people are they expecting to be there?
18, 20,000. I mean, they had 50,000 people at reInvent this year. It's a ridiculously big conference. It's a lot of conferences in Vegas. This is the only conference in Vegas I've seen where they had registration at the luggage claim at the airport.
Jeez.
Wow. Talk about starting it early. You land and then like go get your bag / register for reInvent. Did they have the gifts there then? Like they usually give some pretty nice like registration gifts.
Right? Like, so I stayed at the Aria. So I registered at the Aria, but to get my swag, I had to go down to the expo booth because they wanted people to go to the expo center. But yeah, no swag except at where all the marketing was happening.
That's smart for a couple of reasons, obviously. But yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Like that was like one of the big benefits of besides getting your badge, but that was because they give out nice stuff. Like they gave an Echo show the year that we went there. Would they give you this year?
Just a hoodie. I mean, they were back down to hoodies for everyone. Which I mean, with 50,000 people, what do you do?
Or I'm sorry, dot, not show. Yeah, a hoodie. I mean, they've got good hoodies though. Like I mean, the hoodies they give out are pretty good quality. I don't know why that matters to me, but whatever. You're paying so much for the ticket, I think, is why. Like, I want to get something else out of it besides just awesome technical content. Because I'm selfish, I guess.
Like, yeah, the tickets are expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am interested to see what Reinforce is going to be. But man, yeah, the timing there at the end of June is going to be difficult. Like, just personally, I realize that's going to be a problem. Especially with Black Hat coming up, it's probably only like 3 weeks later, if that.
Yeah, that was the first thing that I noticed. It's like the timing is just gonna be hard to do better.
Yeah, you guys don't want to just stay out there for like a month in Vegas, lose your mind?
Oh, it's in Boston, so
here we go. Oh, I see what you mean. Oh, sorry, yeah. Now I'm looking I have the link now. I'm a great listener. Here's the link. I'm putting it in for everyone in case they're interested. Yeah, that's I mean, I don't know. I'm used to traveling, so I don't know. I'd do it. If someone else was paying for it, I would do it.
Well, I'm not mad about the conference being out there. If they want to have a security conference, that's okay. If I'm disappointed, I hope they don't de-emphasize security at reInvent, right? Like security felt like an actual core part of the platform, and there was enough. So like, I know that when I went out there at my last job, we had system engineers go to security talks that they normally wouldn't have gone to because they're not offered at the other conferences they go to. If they're not going to offer these kind of like how to secure your AWS account with Lambda functions at reInvent, it'll hurt the overall platform.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why we were so excited about reInvent when we initially went, is we had security content, like whatever news going on, but also tied into everything else. So I get exactly what you're saying is, what is the point of that Reinforce then? Is it just a training conference that they're trying to push people to learn how, learn security on the AWS platform? Is it deep dives? That'll be the question. And then is it going to be well attended enough to maintain itself? So going that late, I mean, if it was something like a March, April timeframe, I don't think there'd be a question of me attending it, right? So, and I know there's going to be a lot of other people in that same boat.
Yeah, hopefully it's just an addition to, not detracting from. So, like, what were the most interesting talks that you saw while you were there?
The security hub that they're releasing could be an interesting product. It's super early. They don't have pricing on it, but it brings their 32 security tools that they have spread out through their stuff into one pane of glass, into that single pane of glass, so that you can see what your inspector's doing, how your CIS score is, what your guard duty findings are. So if that gets built out in a way that it looks like it's going to be really handy for security teams, it's going to be multi-account and really allow you to bring all that together in one view.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, so is it? It's literally just going to be a UI that wraps all those different services then?
I hope not I hope an API. I hope there's an API.
Ah.
It's really early. There's going to be a UI, but the API is like, oh, coming soon. So like, I really hope that like the API is scriptable enough to be able to do some really interesting alerting and stuff with.
It kind of cracks me up because like I wonder how many businesses AWS has put out of.
Yeah, that was just going to be my question, right? I mean, that sounds like Evident, right? Or some of those other cloud security vendors that are tying all that together, and compliance standard checks using the configuration items recorded by AWS config, right? It's very similar. Granted, those other products typically do Google and Azure as well, right? But Amazon's the big one.
And when you build your business model off of using somebody else's public API, it's probably only a matter of time before they at least look very hard if they could do it better or cheaper, or if they want your revenue stream, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's what that feels like to me. But we kind of, a couple of years ago, Ken, when we went, that's probably the same analysis we would have given all those security vendors that we saw, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And like they register as a partner with AWS. So it's not like AWS is ever unaware of like, who, because most of these places they're selling, I shouldn't say most, I should say at that time that you're talking about, Seth, often it was the case where you could get it like one of these vendors in like off the marketplace. You could install their AMI or whatever, like, and again, they would be listed as part of the like AWS partners, meaning they had registered and told AWS all about what like their business did and all that stuff. So like, yeah, I'm guessing AWS already has like metric data on usage, and they already know about these businesses. And it's like you said, if it gets to be useful enough, why not just do it yourself? But I also think that AWS they dog food a lot of what they built, right? It's like that's why they build a lot of what they build. So it could just as easily be though that there are times they need these things, and then so they build it.
Yep. There's a ton of machine learning. They're pushing that super hard. I'm not sure, why everybody needs machine learning in 2018, but they released so much SageMaker stuff. So, and they're starting to sell models they built in-house to companies. So it's kind of interesting to sit back and try to figure out what their corporate strategy is over the next 3 years. Like they came out with Firecracker, which is their serverless play, right? Like I really wonder how much longer EC2 is going to be the leader in that space for them. If it still is. I mean, S3 might be bigger for them, but like how long until when you need a service on AWS, you go to something like Firecracker or their AppView or one of their serverless platforms instead of setting up something.
So like their serverless play before that was having Cognito, API Gateway, and Lambda being like the real serverless thing. So like I haven't looked at all at Firecracker. How does that differ from from like using that API Gateway, Lambda kind of those services tied together?
Started to dig in. They're micro VMs. It's supposed to be just drop your code and it runs it kind of thing.
So think of Firecracker as the back end to Lambda, right? So your Lambda tasks actually run inside Firecracker. That's where it comes from. So that's the small secure sandbox that they've built that actually executes those functions. So they're giving you more access into that than they did previously with Lambda. It starts to, I'm sure they're looking at all the different like attack profiles, the virtualization and containerization that's going on there, but it does feel like there could be additional attack surfaces being introduced there that we just don't know about yet. But it could be fun to play with. And supposedly it'll be cheaper than EC2, obviously, right? Otherwise, why use it?
Yeah, and they have Ruby support for Lambda now, which is interesting. Like they really expanded the languages that can run in Lambda.
See, Seth, people use Ruby.
just a couple of years behind everyone else. That's right. We got to get back on the Python train after last week. You know.
Oh yeah. Well, did we talk about Python a lot last week? I can't remember.
No, it was two Rails guys versus me. That's why.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You see John Poole and ask him about machine learning for EC2 instances, scaling. He loves that. That's his favorite new technology.
Sounds like there's more to that we need to know about, but okay, yeah, we will.
Because they announced that too, right? That they have their auto scaling groups. You can now turn on machine learning so that it'll, I guess, figure out when it needs to spin up more EC2 instances automatically.
So, yeah, that sounds kind of fun. So you're trusting Amazon to spin up EC2 instances automatically based on a learning engine that they've written.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's no way that collusion could ever happen in there, right? You know.
No way.
I don't see the incentive.
We're having a bad quarter. Let's tweak this.
Yeah. So there's a lot of machine learning stuff that came out. I was just looking over. So everybody that's listening, jerrygamblin.com, you've got a blog post on there about the different stuff that was announced. And just to go back to, you've got machine learning, AI,
there's a
serverless
there that's really good about AWS well-defined architecture. That's pretty in-depth. That's a good read. I'm only about halfway through it, but it talks about how to really make sure that's where you're at. And when I talk to people today, especially people who want to know like what should I be looking at, it's how to build end-to-end solutions in cloud providers and be able to do that, because it's part of the DevSec ops model, right? Like you have to be able to do almost everything in the cloud.
Yeah. No, yeah, that definitely does look good.
No, when I was doing talks on like AWS security, that was pretty much like in the beginning, I would be like, well, and at the end, like, well, you should also just read the well-architected framework because it'll explain pretty much all of this stuff. But like, I guess it's helpful to have somebody who actually did it, and like show you how they did it. But yeah, it covers a lot of bases.
Cool. And then looks like Control Tower is new as well.
What is Control Tower?
Did you look at that one, Jerry? What did you hear about it?
I saw a little bit of it. It looks like Ansible Tower, to be completely honest. It looks like an automation control platform from what I remember. Like they drop a ton of stuff here.
Oh yeah, I like even just like my AWS updates, like daily updates from reInvent. I can't ever get through more than like one of those in a day, just because there's so much stuff that they drop, and you're never sure what's really relevant to you, right? So yeah, there's all the scaling stuff. Yeah, so where would you start? Somebody that is in AWS, from the things that you learned at reInvent, what would be your kind of first, hey, you should dig into this?
I would really go and look at the new security hub. I think that's going to be a big play for a lot of people, is to kind of finally get a grasp without a third-party tool like Evident on everything that's in your networks, and see if you can kind of tighten that up. And then from there, it's really, this year was all about machine learning. It's all these new SageMaker tools, and outside of there, then you just go to the new EC2 stuff.
Okay. Come on, I see managed blockchain in there. That's got to be number one, right?
No, it's a quantum ledger. It's not blockchain.
Quantum ledger.
You can hear Ken Googling in the background. So you're starting to reach Stefan levels here, Jerry. Slow down. Come on.
No, I'm curious, like what the hell is a quantum ledger database? Transparent, immutable. So it's basically like a smart contract, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm learning, Seth.
There you go. You
They,
are.
There
You can be taught.
we go. Old dogs can be taught new tricks.
No, that's yeah. Yeah,
AWS,
it's interesting.
it was interesting, but at the end of it, you kind of feel like you paid $1,800 to hear a sales pitch for a week, and you did. I mean, I just always figured from the outside that these big like rah-rah sales conferences would be free, like, but this is my third year that I've paid them to go out and hear about their next releases. I guess that's just the way we go now.
Yeah, that's. I mean, when I look at like the security hub, right? That's my initial reaction is, hey, that's awesome, but you didn't release it. It's just like preview or whatever, right? Like, so why are we talking about it yet, right? Just because you could talk about it at reInvent and get some publicity out of it, I guess. But that was my initial reaction to some of that as it's coming out. If I can click on it and I can't use it yet, it doesn't change anything for me. It just means, oh crap, now I need to put a reminder to go back in there at some point and enable that.
It's kind of like Apple marketing. It just kind of like, ever since Steve Jobs started doing that, every CEO wants to be on a big stage and like, oh, one more thing, we now have Quantum Ledger.
Yeah, how much of that was written in the last, month and a half, just so he had something to talk about? That's what you're saying?
AWS writing services and that just are dog shit and just releasing it just to like say they have it. That has just been a repeatable thing. And I like AWS, don't get me wrong, but like over and over again, you'll see services that just are not fully baked whatsoever and released to the public.
And you can't plan, right? Like at my last place, that was the problem, right? We go out there, everybody's super fired up about hosted Kubernetes, no release date. Like we're in a semi-corporate environment. Like if you're gonna like build your own Kubernetes cluster, or like do you just wait until Amazon decides to release this, right? Like sometime in 2018. And you can't plan on that, right? So getting super fired up about something, like even Security Hub, right? Like I looked at it, saw it was in preview, and I'm like, exactly what you did. Like, oh, this will look cool maybe, hopefully in 3 months, right? I'll come back.
Yeah.
I mean, the talks about new services weren't like super intriguing. I've only been once. But like the ones I did enjoy were when people shared, like their Nike, for instance, had a pretty interesting talk where they using like Vault and some AWS services to sort of like maybe like KMS and Vault to do swell. I can't remember anymore. That talk could have been a month ago. I wouldn't remember, but it was good and it was interesting. And let's see, Netflix had some good talks. Like I enjoy the ones where people talk about like what they've done with those services more so than like hearing about new services.
If you get a chance, go read Will's blog on IAM credentials. It was really good. He gave a good talk too.
Will Bankston?
Yeah. Possible?
Yeah, he's coming on the show in 2 weeks, actually, as a matter of fact.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're excited to have that. No, but I think in general that's our takeaway from most conferences, I would say, is the people, it's the practical knowledge, right? The guys that are actually in the trenches doing the stuff. I think that's why I always like the Netflix talks when it comes to cloud security, is they're actually talking about what they've done, right? And how they've accomplished it, rather than, hey, here's this shiny new product that we're going to be releasing in 3 or 4 months, maybe, if the engineers can actually figure out what they're doing, right? Because we all know how the engineering efforts go. We've been involved with those, but the guys that are actually doing it and are putting out tools that are in use is a lot more useful in a daily environment, in a corporate environment, than the pie in the sky stuff.
Yep. Yeah, I would much rather try to dumb down a Netflix tool than to build up a AWS new release, right? Because Netflix releases some cool stuff, but I'm not Will, so sometimes you gotta sit there and look at that for a while and try to figure out how to shoehorn it into your environment.
Yeah, whether or not it's actually useful.
Yeah, Chaos Monkey, great idea. There's probably one company in the world who needs something going around deleting their servers.
And that's the company that built it. Yep.
Yeah,
yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I mean, so that's why it's interesting to talk to somebody that's actually gone out. So was there something else there that other talks outside of what came out of Amazon that like people that you talked to or met with that was interesting?
To be honest, people are kind of like, it almost feels like a tipping point. People are like, oh, it's like somebody, and we're past the decision if I'm moving from my colo or my data center to the cloud. Now we're in, am I staying in a traditional VM cloud, VPS cloud, or am I going to spend this next 18 months moving everything to serverless, right? Like nobody's having the cloud, no cloud discussion anymore. Now it's the VPS versus serverless discussion. And those are going to be really interesting, right? Because it does a couple of things. If you get rid of all your servers, big corporations are going to start seeing some reduction in staff, right? Like if everything goes to Lambda functions or whatever, right? Like you're going to start, don't want to call them wins, but like corporations will start seeing more returns on their cloud investments when they don't have 10,000, 15,000 EC2 instances, and they're all Lambda functions that they only get charged for when they run.
Yeah. And I can see Firecracker going that way as well, right? I mean, because it is giving you that environment. It's very containerization, right? You only spin up, you do X, Y, and Z, and then you store the data and move on. Right. And you add machine learning to that. And I'm sure this is why Amazon's pushing it, because they can charge a whole bunch and you don't have to have somebody sitting there and planning on the increase or the decrease in that load. So at some level, where is it that you pay Amazon to do that for a fourth of the cost that you pay an analyst or somebody else on your own team or on your own staff? So I get it. I get why it goes that direction. But yeah, it'll be interesting to watch.
Yep.
Sorry. No, I was going to throw out, I still remain pretty skeptical on how well it's going to work. Like, instead of writing this one giant shitty app, then I'm sorry, this app that's probably perfectly fine and has some security issues or functionality issues, oh, okay, well, we're going to solve that by running, everything distributed. And we're going to have 30 now small apps that you're going to be responsible for and maintain, or 60 or 200 or 300. Paint me as a cynic. It's fair in this situation.
Well, I mean, we're continuing to chip away at the support staff, right? And I don't know how, when that's going to bite an organization. But you look at, that's the whole idea behind DevSecOps, is we're getting rid of this kind of server administrator layer that has all these years of experience, and we keep pushing all of this back to the developers. We really do. And so it's now on the developer to, spin up environments, to actually automate that, and then, code themselves out of a job.
Well, and it's not even,
yeah,
it doesn't even feel like it's the developer anymore, right? Like you say it's the developer, but in serverless, it's AWS, right? Like upload your jar, upload your whatever file here, click this button and we'll run it for you, right? Like, so then the developer doesn't have to be a server administrator anymore, right? Like you're actually moving backwards, right? Like you built up DevSecOps and Amazon feels like they're trying to strip away SecOps again and just have it where you just need a dev who can point and click in a browser to run the stack.
Yeah, that's fair, right? Yeah, that definitely is getting to that direction, right? So point them in a GitHub repo, and it'll run it and it'll figure it out, and all you have to do is a couple configuration things, and they'll protect it, right, or whatever. Yeah, so we'll see how that actually progresses, but it also limits you as a developer on what it is you can actually use, right? Amazon only supports so many of these different frameworks, and Yeah, but then you can always go to Azure instead. That'll be where everyone ends up, right, Ken? Your company?
My company. No, I mean, there are many. So there's a definitely a push by everyone right now to make it simple for developers to not have, like you said, administrative overhead or other folks they work with to deploy their code. But like and clearly there's a belief that that's going to be the big thing, and I there's no stopping it, right? Serverless is out there. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, yes, there are certainly circumstances where I can totally see that's going to be beneficial for some folks. But on the whole, for a large scale product, like, I mean, how many of those different services do you have to have running in tandem, and how manageable is that? I'm not even talking about from like being able to auto scale to handle requests, input output. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just like the sheer management of those different code bases. I don't know. It just seems there are like I said, there are certainly instances where that'll work, but there are a lot that it won't. As far as my limited view of what I can see the future looking like right now.
I'm totally with you. I just think that it's a 5-year play, right? Like I said, the deal with this year's AWS, it was the first year that there weren't a lot of talks about, are we going to the cloud or not, right? Like the cloud is one. And now I think we're in the VPS versus serverless phase of the cloud fight, right? Because have you guys ran into anybody who are still having the on-premise versus cloud discussion?
No, not at all. But, like one other, I think you're right there. I mean, I don't think that, I think the last holdout was kind of like the government with their whole, like, was FedRAMP the process for getting, or GovCloud or whatever that was? Something like that. Yeah.
FedRAMP's the certification, but I think GovCloud was the rollout, right? That was FedRAMP certified, so everybody could move.
Right. Good. Yeah. And like, they were the last holdout on that in my mind, because if anyone's going to be like super sensitive with good reason about where they're putting their data, like that would, but they switched to using cloud services. I think, I think you're right about that. But like, the one thing I can say pretty unequivocally that I do like about these cloud services is that they remove too much of the like thought of behind encryption. Like that's always, if you ever talk to developers, like that's always the one thing that everyone, like, Seth, how many security training courses have you given, and how many of those times is like that the thing that developers point in on is like encryption?
Oh, every course it comes up, right? Even if we're just, we got a small module on it, everybody's always like, well, how did we do XYZ? What do we have to do? What's the bare minimum?
Right. And
I'll be the cynic now, right? Like I love AWS and that it makes encryption easy, but proving that it's encrypted and proving that you deleted it are two different things, right? Like
you're also, yeah. I mean, what you're saying, and then you're also trusting them with the key to the encryption.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's encrypted, but you don't have that same control that you have if it's your own MySQL server or the ability to.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And again, it goes to like, probably goes back to like, who's the customer of it. Yeah. Like, do I want a startup out of Soho to worry about encryption in their MySQL or MongoDB? Nah, please let AWS do that. If you're a large financial and you've got the staff and the expertise, yeah, like for sure, by all means, do it your own way, but just depends.
I'll take that. Let's flip it. I'll trust the 20-year-olds in Soho to understand how encryption and salting works versus the other guys. But
I see your point. But in theory, like, yeah, there should be that expertise. I guess I've seen too many, like, I've seen inside too many startups seen too many things at this point. It's probably what I should say. Just seen too many things, so I have less trust.
That was going to a dark place.
I know. Sorry, guys.
No, I was just thinking about there was a recent, I can't remember. It was like a web comic or whatever, but it was, about, a startup, the security guy. I'm sure XKCD. No, it's not XKCD. Anyway, but the security guy's like, hey, we need to think about this, or the administrator does, and they're like, no, we're just launching. It's fine. We'll get to that eventually. And then it's like, okay, we launched. Now we need to. Oh no, we've just got a few users, and then oh crap, there was a breach. Why didn't you make us do this? And it's like, we talked about it, right? Like the lone voice in the wilderness of the security guy.
MVP stands for most vulnerable product, right?
That's quotable. I've heard that before. Also, what do you think we wear these hats and silly sweaters for? It's to take this dark podcast in a brighter direction.
It's that time of year. It's just too dark. Yeah.
Well, at least Seth isn't drinking tonight. No. Actually, you should be drinking. It's the season, Seth. Where's your High West?
It's not open yet. I have to do some other things tonight, so we'll crack it. Yeah. Crack it open later. What?
Eggnog and High West. There you go.
Eggnog and High West. That could work.
I actually don't think I've ever drank eggnog. Sorry to totally shift, but I don't think I've ever drank eggnog.
Every time you make pancakes, just have a little swig and you're right there.
Yep. Mm-hmm. You'll be okay. Add some High West to it. You'll be okay. Or Gentleman's Jack. Whatever you want.
I prefer single barrel Jack.
Oh, there you go. Sorry. Single barrel. If we're going that direction, it may as well be what you want it to be.
I took a whiskey class. We're way off topic here, but there is no size for single barrel. The barrel can be as large as Jack Daniel's can make it. It's still called single barrel.
So why is it called single barrel?
Because they can charge more money for
it. Fair enough. It does taste great, though. I'll say that. Single barrel does taste great.
It's blended. It's not mixed, because the other ones are mixed. Like I took a whiskey class in Vegas, and like the non-single barrels can come from multiple batches, and they kind of like try to even it out. The single barrel is literally poured from one barrel of any size.
What's your current favorite whiskey? Mine's Blanton's.
There's a Cobalt brewery here in Chicago that does small batch stuff, which also small batch there doesn't matter what size it is. It could be 1 billion bottles, but it's really good.
It just gives it that air of exclusivity. Yes. How do you spell it? Now I'm curious. How do you spell that company?
Koval.
Okay. Awesome. Looking it up. I didn't know you. So where'd you take a whiskey tasting or whiskey class at?
There's a place off Vegas. It's called like off the strip in Vegas. It's called like the Whiskey School. And like they just do groups out there. It'd be great for like a DEF CON meetup. Like you do 3 or 4 different flights of they show you like the Japanese whiskeys, the Irish whiskeys, and the American whiskeys, and they tell you about the differences and the similarities and like what makes what. And like in this room, they probably had 500 or 600 bottles.
Is this the Whiskey Attic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sweet. Sounds like we need to make a trip, Ken.
Heck, that's exactly what I was thinking. You read my mind. I'm pasting the link too. To be fair, we've posted a lot of links that were technical tonight, but I do think.
Well, what one of the initial names for the podcast was going to be AppSec and whiskey. So there you go.
That was the original idea. We just get shithoused and drink whiskey and rant about stuff. Now we're not that far off, but I never drink whiskey, so
we have to do this live. Then we have to like figure out like when you guys have Will on, like talk to him about letting us do that live at B-Side San Francisco in March.
Ooh. San Francisco, that'd be a good idea. I know we like because we've got we don't have a guest lined up purposefully for the week of AppSec Cali, and I think we're still trying to put together like what we're going to do while we're out there. But I think it would be sort of what you mentioned, and I would love to do it again in March with you and Will. But yeah, like I think at AppSec Cali, I want to definitely get some folks together and figure out how to do it. You know,
That's January, right?
Yeah, so it'd be January 22nd that I'd be looking at, which is, yeah, I mean, or just sometime that week. Probably, it probably couldn't be on that day because I don't think the conference officially starts on that day. I think that's training days, but yeah, that week.
We have a lot of conferences.
Oh yeah, there's so many conferences. So speaking of that, what conferences are you going to over the next few months?
The only one people on this podcast care about is I have 2 talks at B-Side San Francisco. I have some coming up, one on building an application security program and one on automating bug bounty findings or bug hunting. Just some scripts that I've thrown together to kind of automate the new Burp 2.0 stuff. So they should be really good talks. And then I have some marketing duties over the next couple of months that will get me to some super exciting conferences that nobody listening here will ever go.
Oh yeah, why is that?
Like the Health Information Management Conference in Florida. And
you never know. You never know. Maybe people are into that. I don't know. Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
You say that, but I actually know people that have gone to that conference. So, you know, we'll send them your way when they are there. So, sweet. Let's see, where are we at? So,
congratulations on
conferences.
I was gonna say congratulations on the 2 talks. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Never submit a backup talk when you think that your first talk is just 90% of the way there, and you're like, okay, I got one more, and then they both get accepted, and you get that on the plane back from AWS reInvent, and you're like, oh wow, now I'm running 2 talks.
That's always how it is too. It's you write the abstract, you've got all that in your head. You're like, this is how I picture this is going to be, and then like, but there's rarely unless you're giving the same talk that maybe has like an updated version, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just the same talk. Unless you're doing that, usually that's always the case, right? You get accepted, and you're like, shit, now I have to write this. I have to actually do this work.
Yep.
That's a double-edged sword of that.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think that's happened to me before too, right? Learn to take the rejection as oh good, I don't have to hate my past self now because if I got accepted, great. I only have one thing that I need to do, not 4 instead.
What was I thinking when I wrote this abstract? This makes no sense.
Yeah. Oh crap. How do I fit this research into that abstract?
They should do it. They should do a talk where they should do a conference where everybody submits a talk, and then if you're accepted, you just get one of the other accepted abstracts.
You have to figure it out. Who was it? I can't remember. Sean Jackson, who helps with HackWest. That was one of the things that he always wanted to do was, here's a slide deck, go give this talk, right? Not like, so it's just like a fire talk idea is, hey, you're kind of a security guy. Here's a topic and see if you can go present on it. And what will you learn and what will they learn, right?
But it would have to be at a place that doesn't charge a whole lot because, oh my God, I've seen the Twitter rage when people have said, oh yeah, I kind of put the last bits of this together last minute. Not saying the whole talk was done last minute, although some people said that, but like, last bits of it are kind of, and then people just get up in arms. They're like, oh, if I'm paying $1,000, then, yada, yada, yada. Like, I don't want to hear how it's, last minute talk and all that stuff. Fair point if the talk is terrible, but in my experience, there are wonderful talks that are put together relatively. And I'm not saying mine either. I would never say that. I would say I've seen people who I know for a fact put their talks together fairly last minute, at least like put the last bits of it, the polish and all that. And came out great. It just depends on the person's, but yeah, you can't even say anymore. Like, which I guess it's a fair point. You want to have value in like $1,000 ticket price for sure. But like, man,
if the speaker's getting paid, and I mean paid for the talk, it better be on point. But if it's we'll cover your $500 flight and put you up here for a night. That's kind of my issue, right? Like, you can pay $1,000 for a ticket, but if the person giving the talk is still in the B-sides mode where they're doing it for basically free, you really can't expect that much over from them, because you don't know, maybe work blew up on them, maybe they had a family issue or something, right? Like, it's not anything. And we've all been doing this long enough. Like, if the name recognition from speaking at conferences was really a thing, all three of us would be like CISOs at like the biggest companies in the world, right? Like,
it means it means not a whole lot. And what's funny is, like, that's sort of what RSA sells you on, I think, a little bit, like name, like you said, like recognition or whatever. But like, it's what you said. I mean, they put you through this rigorous process and you don't get a thing as a speaker. I mean, I'm sure they pay their keynotes, but I mean, I know they pay their keynotes, but in terms of everybody else that they put through this process, like, those speakers don't get a thing. Hate to bust the illusion. That's why I'm like one and done. Like, I did it, but like, I'm not doing it again, because that was just too much work for what reason? I mean, it didn't change my life.
Well,
in any measurable.
I mean, even like, to your point, Ken, right? Even the paid conference, and and Jerry, like, even the paid conferences like Black Hat, right? Like, if you look at how much they actually pay you and how much work goes into one of those talks, it's basically peanuts, right? You may be working for a minimum wage when it really comes down to it, because it's not
shit, like, man. Just the abstract, writing the abstracts. Forget the talk. Like, just getting your abstract in and it being something that's maybe semi-viable to actually be like considered is a process, and hard work in and of itself.
Yep. Yeah, and that's just what I'm saying. Is it's like, so somebody complaining about talks that they see at one of those paid conferences, they're they don't really have a lot of room to stand on, or ground to stand on, whatever you want to say. Now, like, you take that away from like a training, and those, there's a lot more of expectations. There's a lot more expectations that go into that, and a lot more that they should be expecting, right? Because I've been in trainings before that are crap that I've paid money for, or my company has, but if it was my own money, I probably would have been a lot more upset about it. But anyway. So those of us that are actually doing this, like, Jerry is saying, we do put there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but as to when that actually happens, that's the question, is how much time you have and how much time you can invest into a talk versus a training versus whatever else is going on.
I'll say that's one thing I enjoy in life right now, is that, if I do a talk, it's not because I'm not making anybody any money. I'm not marketing. Not that, I mean, that's perfectly fine to do that. I'm just glad I'm not having to do that right now. I'm glad that, like, I'm very happy right now and not having to do the speaker circuit. And if it's nice when you can do talks just because you want to do it and it's fun, not because, like, you feel the pressure. And that's sort of, I think, why we all, or at least a decent percentage of people, keep doing it, right? Is that you do have to, that is promotion. That's the reality, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but that, there's definitely a promotion aspect to it.
Well, sometimes you just want to, like, on the outside of that, sometimes it's just good to share with your colleagues, right? And the people in the community. You might not always know the most, right? And like, I think that I've seen you guys all speak, and I don't know everything, but here's what I found, right? Like, some of the best talks I've been to end up with, this didn't turn out the way I wanted to. I'm 80% there. And like, those are the kind of talks that I like to see, right? Like, and technical talk should be that way.
Yeah, there's no reason you can't have fun, and I guess that's why, like, now I'll be honest. Like, in my last gig, there were times I didn't want to be on the road. I wanted to be at home and with my family, or I wasn't. I think actually that the year I spoke at RSA, we went out to dinner, Jerry, and I was deathly sick that whole trip, and I still had to go and do the talk and go out to dinners and stuff like that, and like, that was my point, is that it's nice to just, and there are definitely folks, like you said, that are, it's a mix, right? But yeah, like, it's freeing to know that you can do it when you can do it just for fun. I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yep. Cool. So Jerry, any last minute thoughts? I mean, we've been going for almost an hour and a half. I feel like we could do this for like 3 hours if we wanted to, but probably call it pretty quick.
I'm good. I think I'm going to go grab some pizza and start hacking on some stuff.
All right. Well, we'll let us know if anything pops up, as far as, you want us to do disclosure on it, right?
Yeah. And talk about somebody who does stuff for fun. Like, you're constantly breaking stuff apart. It's fun to watch. Honestly, Jerry, it's fun to watch. And thank you for like publicizing all the stuff that you find too. It's always fun.
I really enjoy doing it. Like, I'm glad that I work at such a great place like Kenna that gives me the freedom to spend some time on this, right? Like, it's Ed and company have built a really amazing thing here, and I'm glad to be a part of this team.
Yeah, I know at your last job, like, definitely you were doing a lot of this stuff like all on the weekends and at night and late at night, and like then also doing your day job. So it's nice that you can like, have that baked into your work schedule,
Yep, for sure.
Cool. Well, good. So it sounds like people know where they can see you. As far as, security stuff, I mean, any last minute recommendations? I think we've already talked about AWS, reInvent, enough. Yeah. Any closing thoughts before we call it?
No, I'm good. This has been really fun. I'm looking forward to doing this again. Hopefully we can do something around B-sides.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll put it on the calendar. See what Ken's got going on, what our travel schedules look like, but definitely I think that would be fun. Ken, anything else that we should mention before we wrap things up tonight?
Well, speaking of promotions and marketing and doing stuff, no, we've got our course at AppSec Cal. I did want to just mention that, where we're doing the code review course. So we've only done it at, where did we do? We did it at AppSec USA and then AppSec Day in Melbourne. So this will be our third time doing it. Yep. So I'm excited about it. Like I said, I only do stuff for fun now, which is really nice and freeing. And this is the one reason that we keep doing it, is because it is very fun. And it's like, the only thing I'll say is like, because I actually did submit that. We submitted that for Black Hat USA, and one of the things I said about it was like the second day is very interesting because the second half of the course is all people taking all of the exercise we've put them through for the last day and a half and applying it against real world applications, and seeing those people come up and present on each, they each have 5 minutes to present on their findings using the methodology that we gave them and had them practice. It's like, it was amazing to see people over and over again in a short several hour period find vulnerabilities over and over again in open source applications that are actually out there. So
it's awesome.
It was just cool. It's cool to see that it worked. So
yeah, it's fun. I mean, we know we use it. It's the methodology that we use as we're looking at code. So come talk to us about it. Share your methodology with us as well, right? We've had a lot of consultants that were in the course, especially at AppSec USA. It was interesting to kind of get their take and on how they perform the reviews. But it is what we use to find vulnerabilities. So if you're going to be at AppSec Cali, consider it. Otherwise, just come up and say hi too, right? Yeah, Jerry, hang on. Don't drop off as we wrap things up. But thanks everybody for joining tonight. Thanks for the interactions, and we'll talk soon. Catch us online.
Bye. Later.